welcome, you little sausage muffins. And today is another how to draw a city. And today we are going to be talking about graveyards. Graveyards, mausoleums, that type of thing. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the placement of them and how to draw them. Shooting for about 10 minutes, so let's see how well I do. So first and foremost, placement. If we're talking about a graveyard, I think having graveyards near, let's say, European-style churches absolutely makes sense. If this is going to be a larger, more sprawling affair, then maybe not, right? So I want to kind of just underscore, what is your culture? What are we drawing? What do we want to invoke? For example, if this was more Egyptian inspired, we might be well outside the walls, because they do a lot of out of city, almost New Orleans style monument. By the way, I'm not talking about the pyramids and things like that, but they have these vast fields of graves and mausoleums that they do, these veritable mazes. And we could definitely do that, but what does that mean? It's outside of the city, right? While if we go more of your tranquil English countryside with a little tiny church, and like the people that go to the church get buried in the church grounds, well, maybe that could be interior to the city. And we can absolutely do both. Also, the Romans, they tended to, like, along the Appian Way, they would have their dead alongside. Now, the poor were buried in a big, huge pit. There was one area of the city where they basically, would just throw the dead and cover them up. But if we're talking about something that actually is going to get mapped, and we're talking about, like, these mausoleums and these graves alongside the roads, well, that's another way of doing it. Maybe alongside this road here. And I think that's what I'm going to do. So today I'm going to do two approaches. And we might do a second part of this, and I'll show you some more monument-style things that you could do inside your graveyards. But let's do a small graveyard inside the city, and then let's do the larger sprawling one as the city has grown. If we're going to do inside the city, and maybe let's draw close to where we've been at. Over time, we're going to fill this entire map. Let's say that there was a point when this city kind of grew, right? And it probably grew, let's say, alongside the river. They had some, harbors, that type of thing. And at some point, there would have been a little church or a temple or something like that cropping up. And I'm going to feel a little bit like up here towards the hill, okay? That maybe a church appeared, and from there, small church ground. So let's draw ourselves a church first, right? Let's check our layers. Ink layer, brush, black, we're good. Okay, so let's just draw a small church. Let's not go too crazy with it. I've got the yellow highlight on so you can see what I'm doing here. Again, church, temple, doesn't matter. Now remember our techniques for making sure a building such as this stands out. A little bit of roof detail, right? Now, let's say this is going to be our road coming up. I'm going to actually, I don't normally do this, but if I don't have buildings either side, you can't work off the negative space. So we'll just do a little path coming up. Let's do a building further down here just to start framing our grounds. Just to create like a little roadway in between. And I think what we'll do is we'll get a little fenced off area with the odd tree, maybe some bushes. And we'll do the same on the back of the church here. This is the edge of the hill, that grey line. So let's kind of mark off the church grounds. And I'm going to use a combination of bushes and trees. Now this is interior to the city. And cities, as they grow, real estate gets more and more valuable, right? Now, any established church, temple, that type of thing, would almost certainly stay, maybe with a whole bunch of stuff built up around them. You don't have to demolish them all, but this is going to be kind of that unique little sort of patch of green in amongst what's going to be a whole bunch of buildings around it. And that, honestly, sometimes can add so much to the visual quality of your map. It makes it just more interesting than just having just a sprawl. I just literally gestured with my hands as if you could see it, but a sprawl of buildings everywhere. Okay, so something like that. We just marked off the grounds. Now, how to draw this? I'm actually going to make this just a tad smaller because we're going to do a little bit more detailed. I'd like to think that what is one of the properties of a whole bunch of graves where people have walked, right, to revisit their loved ones? You've got these little paths and everything in between. Now, there are also overgrown areas, which I think we can also accommodate here. But let's just say that the church itself has got some grounds like so. Let's do something like this. Let's kind of mark off. And this will really pop when we get into colouring. So we'll do something like that. And let's kind of have a couple of little paths coming away. And I love to make my paths almost, I don't want to say maze-like, but intricate, I think would be the phrase. Intricate. Because they're creating these little pockets of areas where our loved ones are laid to rest. And I think this area right here would be a good place to actually maybe have a little bit overgrown. Let's do the same here. Just basically doing a little light dotted line. This also allows me to pick a gap in the dots, by the way, like so. And kind of do a little sort of path coming off it. So let's do something like this. And well, let's join this back up right there. So this is one of the first things I do. I kind of mark off my paths before I do any graves. Let's do one kind of coming here like this. And you know what we'll do is we'll create a bigger kind of mausoleum-like area. All right. First and foremost, that starts to have, I'm going to call it that graveyard quality, right? Let's just, there we go. Because not only is it a open area in the middle of our town and our city, but look at how those paths are already beginning to frame the fact that there is something going on here, right? Now, you could say that that's a park, but I would say that the paths are too intricate for a park. They have random purpose to them. And I think that in an older sort of graveyard, it's a little bit like that, right? Where we've got these patches where we've, got these graves and such, and people have come and gone and walked to them. Maybe we've got a little zone here and a little zone there. So I get more of a graveyard vibe from this than I do, let's say, a park vibe. I would lessen the number of paths going on in here and probably have a little bit more of symmetrical order if it was going to be a park. Maybe there'll be a future episode. We'll draw some parks. Actually, there we go. Idea. Ding! So, with this, now what? Well, we've got... let's zoom in a little bit. That gets fuzzy. There we go. So, different ways of doing this. What does a gravestone look like from above? It looks like that. But what do gravestones laid out have about them as a quality, order? They are laid out like this. Now, by the way, I wouldn't normally do so many like this, but to give you an idea, that's one way of literally doing them. And if I did that, by the way, all over, which is exactly what we're going to do, then the mind starts to see gravestones, right? In combination with the paths and everything else. Now, Christian nation and everything to one side, I also like to occasionally throw in a little cross, like so. Only because I feel like they're very indicative of a graveyard environment. And you'll notice I'm kind of doing them almost side on, right? Because across from above would look like that. But if you do it more like this here, I think that in combination with the other shapes that we have drawn and are about to draw starts to actually create this sense of a graveyard that is, let's just say, got some age to it. Maybe some of these markers have fallen over. Maybe they're broken. For example, drawing gravestones literally on their sides. This type of thing works well, especially if you combine it with the other shapes. Something like this. Now, you could totally do the whole area just like this, but what else do you see in graveyards? Well, you see the larger mausoleums, right? Get a door on the front of that. And you see statues. Maybe we'll do another one here. You see plinths. Family mausoleums. Mausoleums at the end of a path, maybe with little pillars leading up to them. If you add, by the way, mausoleums like this, I'm gonna add some overgrowth to this here. I'm gonna actually make this a little bit more tumbled and get some little trees and stuff in here, so this looks a little bit more overgrown in this area. There we go. Nice. Nice. Let's do one here too. Let's get a nice little mausoleum at the end. Let's put maybe 2 statues or 2 pillars at the front of it. Maybe here too. And notice how a combination of those mausoleums, little insinuations of statues, gravestones from above. We've got the actual sort of fallen sort of crosses and gravestones. Another thing you can do, of course, is this. And by combining these shapes, look how quickly this starts to take on a graveyard-like aspect to it. You'll also notice, particularly in the areas where I want it to be more current, modern, used, I'm kind of keeping everything uniform. Let's do 2 things right there. There's a certain amount of, I don't want to say symmetry, but cleanliness to the layout. Order, I suppose we could say, to the layout. Let's do another mausoleum right here. There we go. Maybe one here. And in the corner, let's have some kind of like statue type thing. Maybe overlooking a particular grave right there. Now let's zoom out. And Doesn't that look like a little graveyard? Actually, it's got a lot of graves in there. It's not even a tiny one. But doesn't that look like a little graveyard to you? And that's all I did. I combined the shapes from above, falling down, kind of a cross, mausoleum, large mausoleum, little statue or pillar, more intricate statue of some description. Just a combination of those around our paths, and voila, we have a graveyard. Now, if we mix this up a little bit, and we're already at 15 minutes, so I've already failed. So maybe part 2, we'll kind of like do the out of city, but similar principle. We are going to mark this road off, and we're going to maybe draw graves, Appian Way style, falling outside. But let's do that as part 2. Let's do this at part 2. It'll be these principles, but more so. And maybe also in part 2, I'll show you some extra things that you can throw in your graveyards. So with that said, thank you everyone for watching this video. Really do appreciate it. I love your support so much. If there was ever anything that you would like to see me draw and how I would approach it, let me know in the comments or let me know in my Patreon. All of you, so much love. I will see you on the flip side.